We have a word for fear of the ocean, thalassophobia. For almost all of human history, nobody needed that word. Not because people weren't afraid, because almost no one went far enough out to find out what they were afraid of. Picture yourself standing on a beach 10,000 years ago, bare feet in wet sand, the tide pulling at your ankles like it wants something back. In front of you, the water goes flat and gray and just keeps going. No far shore, no landmarks, just horizon, and then more horizon behind that. You can hear it breathing in and out against the rocks. You have no idea what's underneath you. Neither did anyone else alive at that moment. For our species, that was the edge of the world, not a metaphor. The actual edge. So why didn't people just get in a boat and go find out? Because for most of human history, going out meant not coming back. There was no way to know how far the water went, no way to know what was in it, and no way to call for help if something went wrong. Anthropologists studying pre-modern coastal societies have found a consistent pattern. People fished, they gathered shellfish, they paddled around bays and river mouths, but they hugged the coastline. The open ocean was left alone. Think about a fisherman a few thousand years ago, out at dawn in a dugout canoe, staying close enough to shore that he can still see smoke from his own cooking fire. That's not caution, that's survival math. Go too far, lose sight of land, and the odds of dying jump enormously. But didn't early humans cross open water anyway? Isn't there evidence of that happening incredibly early? Yes, and this is where it gets strange. On the Indonesian island of Flores, archaeologists led by researchers including Mike Morwood uncovered stone tools dating back roughly 1 million years. Tools that belonged not to modern humans, but to an earlier hominin species, possibly Homo erectus. The problem is, Flores was never connected to the mainland. Even at the lowest sea levels of the Ice Age, there was open water in the way. Water deep enough and wide enough that swimming it wasn't realistic. Something crossed anyway. Picture a handful of early hominins on a mat of tangled bamboo and driftwood, swept out from a river mouth during a storm, drifting for days with no idea where they're going, and washing up by accident on an island nobody from their world had ever seen. Not an expedition. An accident that became a colonization. So if crossing water was possible that early, why did it take so long for humans to actually explore it on purpose? Because surviving an accidental crossing and choosing to sail into open water are two completely different acts. One is chance, the other requires believing you'll come back. And almost nothing in the ancient world gave people a reason to believe that. The real story isn't that ancient people were incapable of building boats that could survive the ocean. Plenty of coastal cultures built excellent boats. The real story is that the ocean gave them every reason to think it would kill them, and almost no reason to think otherwise. What did people actually believe was out there? Look at the ancient Greeks. They imagined the entire known world as a disk, encircled by a vast river ocean they called Oceanus, a boundary beyond which lay nothing anyone could describe with confidence. In Homer's Odyssey, the sea isn't scenery. It's a character, and a hostile one. Sailors are swallowed by whirlpools, lured onto rocks by singing voices, crushed by monsters with 6 heads apiece. Picture an old sailor back on dry land, telling this story to a circle of children by firelight, and watching the story their faces go pale at the part about the whirlpool. That story wasn't just entertainment. It was the culture's way of encoding a hard truth. Go out too far, and the sea decides if you come home. Did anyone actually try to test the limits of that fear? A few did, and their stories are almost unbelievable. According to the historian Herodotus, the Egyptian pharaoh Necho II commissioned Phoenician sailors around 600 BCE to sail all the way around the African continent. They apparently did it in a journey that took roughly 3 years, stopping seasonally to plant and harvest grain along the way. Herodotus himself didn't believe part of their account, specifically their claim that partway through the voyage, the sun appeared on their right-hand side instead of their left. Modern historians now consider that exact detail the strongest evidence the voyage was real, because it's precisely what would happen if you crossed into the southern hemisphere, something no one in Greece could have simply guessed. Imagine those sailors, thousands of miles from anything familiar, watching the sun rise in what felt like the wrong part of the sky, and having no framework at all to explain why. So why didn't stories like that end the fear once and for all? Because one successful voyage doesn't cancel out 1,000 years of drownings, wrecks, and disappearances. The real story is that fear of the ocean wasn't really about the water, it was about not knowing. Medieval European mapmakers filled in unexplored ocean regions with sea serpents and monstrous fish, and while the popular phrase, "here be dragons," only survives on a single globe from around 1510, the spirit behind it was everywhere. Cartographers of the era, when they didn't know what was out there, didn't leave it blank. They filled it with teeth. Picture a mapmaker in a candlelit workshop, dipping his pen and drawing a coiled sea monster over a patch of ocean he has genuinely never seen because an empty space on a map felt more dangerous to a customer than a labeled threat. What finally changed? Oddly, it wasn't courage. It was navigation. Somewhere in the Central Pacific, a completely different relationship with the ocean was developing. One built not on fear of it, but on reading it. Polynesian navigators, studied extensively by anthropologists like Patrick Kirch, and experimental voyagers like Ben Finney crossed thousands of miles of open Pacific water using no instruments at all. They read the angle of ocean swells against the hull. They tracked the flight paths of birds at dusk to find islands over the horizon. They memorized star paths that shifted with the seasons. Over the course of several centuries, they settled nearly every habitable island across an ocean covering a third of the planet, from Hawaii to New Zealand to Easter Island, arguably the most isolated inhabited landmass on Earth. Picture a navigator lying flat in the hull of a canoe at night, not steering by sight, but feeling the rhythm of swells through the wood beneath his spine, reading the ocean like a language. For these communities, the sea wasn't the enemy, it was the map. But wasn't the wider world still terrified of it? Almost entirely? Yes. For most of Europe, the Atlantic carried a name that tells you everything: Mare Tenebrosum, the Sea of Darkness. Sailors believed that far enough out, the water simply boiled, or ships fell off the edge entirely. It took until the late 15th century for European sailors to commit to sustained ocean crossings, and even then, crews on Columbus's voyages reportedly grew mutinous with fear as weeks passed without sight of land. Picture a sailor gripping the rail of a creaking wooden ship, watching the horizon for the 20th straight day, convinced in his gut that they've sailed past the edge of what God intended people to see. So when did humans stop fearing the ocean's surface and start fearing what was underneath it instead? Almost immediately after they conquered the surface. Once ships could reliably cross oceans, a new horror opened up: depth. For centuries, nobody had any idea what existed below a few hundred feet. That changed with the HMS Challenger expedition, which set out in 1872 and spent nearly 4 years sailing more than 68,000 nautical miles, dropping weighted lines to measure the ocean floor and dredging up whatever lived down there. They recorded a depth of over 8,000 meters in what we now call the Mariana Trench, and hauled up thousands of species no scientist had ever documented. Creatures built for crushing pressure and total darkness. Picture a crew member on deck, hauling up a dredge net from a place deeper than any mountain on Earth is tall, and finding something inside it that looks like nothing anyone in the crew has ever seen. Something with no eyes at all, because it has never once needed them. Isn't that fear basically gone by now? Not even close. It just changed shape. Even today, by most estimates, more of the ocean floor remains unmapped in fine detail than has been surveyed. And it's often repeated that people know less about the deep sea than about the surface of the moon. The fear didn't disappear when we built better boats or better instruments. It just moved from the horizon to the depths, from what's out there to what's down there. The shape changes. The feeling underneath it hasn't moved an inch. So think about that word again: thalassophobia. It sounds clinical, modern, like something invented for a psychology textbook. But it isn't new at all. It's just the newest name for the oldest feeling humans have. Every time you've stood at the edge of the ocean and felt that small drop in your stomach, that instinct to not go in too far, that's not weakness. That's every ancestor you ever had, going back further than your species even existed, whispering the same warning they whispered to each other on beaches for 100,000 years. You didn't learn to fear the ocean, you inherited it. And the next time you're standing at the waterline, feeling that pull at your ankles, that's not just tide, that's history. Still running through you, still doing exactly what it's always done.